Everything you saw in The Conjuring was a lie, but the real history of Bathsheba Sherman is far more disturbing than any Hollywood jump scare. While the movies painted her as a murderous witch who impaled babies and cursed land, the official records tell a story of a woman trapped between documented tragedy and dark Rhode Island folklore. Was she a monster, or a victim of a century-long smear campaign? Welcome to the Conjuring Files, where we open the vaults of history to separate myth from truth. In this new file, we confront one of modern horror's most infamous villains, Bathsheba Sherman. But strip away the white gown, the glowing eyes, and the demonic growl, and what remains is a quiet farmer's wife, born in 1812, buried in 1885, and erased by legend. The Arnold estate in Harrisville, Rhode Island, now known as the Conjuring House, is real. Its fields, its stone walls, its cellar are all documented. But the entity that haunts it, that's where fiction begins. In the film, Bathsheba is a Satan-worshipping witch who sacrificed her child and cursed the land. In reality, she was Bathsheba Thayer, who married Judson Sherman in 1837, raised 4 children, and lived a life of rural hardship. Genealogical records show no evidence of infanticide, witchcraft trials, or occult activity. Her husband was a respected farmer. Her neighbors were kin. Yet after her death, whispers began. And when the Perron family moved in 130 years later, those whispers became screams. Hollywood needed a villain. History offered a widow. So they rewrote her life into a nightmare. Because a grieving mother doesn't sell tickets. But a baby-killing witch? That's box office gold. The root of the darkness lies in a single tragic day in 1849. While Bathsheba was caring for a neighbor's child, the infant died mysteriously. The town whispered of a sewing needle. A medical examination found a puncture at the base of the child's skull. The community was convinced it was murder. A court of law cleared her. There was no evidence of foul play. But in a small, isolated farming community, a legal verdict rarely stops a growing legend. To them, she was forever the woman who escaped justice. She was the monster in their midst. The film claims she sacrificed her own child. Yet records show her son, Herbert, lived a long, successful life, eventually marrying and starting his own family long after her death. If she was a child killer, why was her only son a thriving member of the community? Bathsheba didn't hang herself as a young woman. She died in 1885 at the age of 73, having suffered a stroke, then called paralysis. She was buried with a Christian service by a Baptist minister, an honor reserved for the respected. In January 1971, Roger and Carolyn Perron brought their 5 daughters to the old Arnold estate. They were looking for peace. Instead, they found dirt appearing on clean floors, the smell of rotting flesh, and cold spots that never moved. The eldest daughter, Andrea, recalls Manny, a silent boy who watched the children play. But the basement held a different energy, a weight, a presence that Carolyn felt most acutely. The haunting wasn't a movie set. For them, it was a terrifying daily reality. The legend of Bathsheba was reborn when Carolyn felt a sharp, piercing pain in her calf. She found a puncture wound. This specific injury led investigators to link the spirit to the 1849 sewing needle legend, regardless of historical fact. Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived to help. They conducted a seance that left the family even more traumatized. Carolyn was reportedly thrown across the room, possessed. It was this event that cemented Bathsheba's name as the Demon of Harrisville. But there's a problem. Bathsheba never lived in the Conjuring House. She lived on the Sherman farm, nearly a mile away. The geography of the haunting doesn't match the geography of her life. She was a woman accused across distance and time. Some researchers, and even Andrea Perron, have suggested the true spirit was Prudence Arnold. She actually lived and died in the house at age 93. But Prudence didn't have a witch legend attached to her. Bathsheba was the more convenient villain, because the real horror isn't the ghost in the attic. It's the erasure of a woman's truth, to feed our hunger for monsters. It's easier to believe in a baby-killing witch than the quiet, difficult life of a 19th century widow. Bathsheba Sherman was a mother, a wife, and a survivor. In the end, she was haunted not by demons, but by the gossip of her neighbors and the creative license of Hollywood. May her true story finally be heard. Next time on the Conjuring Files, the infant death that started it all, and the gossip that never died. We dive deeper into the 1849 trial and the medical evidence that the town chose to ignore.
No marks on child.
In 1843, an infant in Bathsheba's care died under mysterious circumstances. No autopsy was performed, no charges were filed, but in the close-knit farming community of Burrowville, Rhode Island, that didn't matter. Rumors spread like wildfire. She pricked the baby with a needle. She whispered to the trees at night, "She's not like us." Court records from the era show no indictment, but local diaries tell another story. One neighbor wrote, "Bathsheba walks alone. The child cried once, then never again." Another noted, "She stares at the moon too long." History remembers the monster, but the records remember a woman. Born Bathsheba Thayer in 1812, she was a daughter of Rhode Island soil. In 1844, on her 32nd birthday, she married Judson Sherman. They began a life that would one day be twisted into legend. They lived on the Sherman farm, a modest plot just a mile from the old Arnold estate. Here, the real history of Bathsheba was written in stone. Unlike the cinematic demon, the real Bathsheba raised a son, Herbert Leander, who lived to adulthood and survived his parents. But she also knew the weight of loss. 3 of her other children died young, a tragedy that the community used to fuel their darkest suspicions. In 19th century New England, women who lived outside social norms, widows, healers, outsiders, were easy targets for local folklore. Crop failures and disease outbreaks demanded explanation, and when science failed to provide one, the community turned to the supernatural. A woman who kept to herself was labeled a witch. A child who died suddenly was seen as a sacrifice. Bathsheba was neither. She was likely a midwife, a role that put her at the center of life's most fragile moments. When a child died, the grief was hers to bear alone, but the community needed a scapegoat, so they gave her horns. In a world without facts, gossip became gospel. The stain stuck. By the time she died in 1885 of natural causes, her name was already shadowed. History, however, was about to be rewritten again. She was buried in hallowed ground at Harrisville Cemetery, a place strictly denied to those accused of witchcraft or suicide. In 1971, the Perron family moved into the neighboring estate. They reported smells of rot and the presence of a malevolent woman. Then came Ed and Lorraine Warren. It was Lorraine who pointed a finger at Bathsheba, linking her to a demonic lineage from Salem. In 2013, the film The Conjuring transformed Bathsheba into a global monster, a demonic entity with a thirst for blood. The woman was lost. Because of the legend, Bathsheba's real grave has been repeatedly vandalized, stolen and broken by those hunting for a demon that never was. In 2023, a new marker was finally placed to protect her. But the ghost of the rumor remains more powerful than the ghost of the woman. Because in a world without facts, rumor becomes history, and women become witches. Bathsheba wasn't a monster. She was a victim of time. We often find what we go looking for. The world went looking for a demon and found exactly what it wanted to see. The truth was the casualty. Bathsheba's story fused with New England's deepest fears of the outsider and the unknown. Truth is buried under decades of storytelling, but in the shadows of Burrillville, the legend will never truly die. The price of fame is often the destruction of a name. Next, how the Conjuring House became a global phenomenon of the paranormal and the price of a local legend. The truth remains buried.
Bathsheba didn't exist in a vacuum. She lived in the heart of New England's vampire panic, a 19th century wave of exhumations where families dug up corpses to burn hearts, believing tuberculosis was caused by the undead feeding on the living. In Rhode Island alone, over 20 such cases were documented. The land itself was seen as cursed. Native American legends spoke of spirits in the woods. Puritan settlers feared the wilderness as Satan's domain, and by the 1800s, every unexplained death was blamed on hidden evil. When Bathsheba died, locals didn't see a natural passing. They saw confirmation. She never aged, some claimed. Her eyes stayed open in the coffin. Superstition turned her burial into a ritual. Stones were placed on her grave to keep her down. Trees were planted to block her spirit's path. The land around the Arnold estate had long been called unquiet. Before the Shermans, it was farmed by families who reported nightmares, livestock deaths, and cold spots. Was it poor soil, isolation, or the weight of collective fear? Whatever the cause, Bathsheba became its symbol. Not because she was evil, but because she was convenient. A woman alone, a child dead, a silence that begged for a story. And so the legend grew. She cursed the land. She waits in the walls. She takes new children to replace the one she lost. But the truth? She was just a woman who died and was never allowed to rest. Next, how the Warrens turned folklore into a global phenomenon.
She watches me bathe.
In 1970, the Perron family moved into the old Arnold farmhouse, a 14-room estate in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Roger and Carolyn Perron brought their 5 daughters to what they hoped would be a peaceful home. But peace was never part of the plan. Within weeks, they reported slamming doors, phantom footsteps, and a presence that watched from the corner. The youngest daughter claimed a woman in white stood over her bed, whispering the same 3 words. "Let me in." Enter Ed and Lorraine Warren. The famed paranormal investigators soon declared the house demonically oppressed. They identified the spirit as Bathsheba Sherman, a 19th century woman they claimed was a witch. The Warrens alleged she had sacrificed her child to Satan, cursing the land before hanging herself. Their version, repeated in lectures and books, became the definitive narrative of the haunting. But here's what they omitted. The records tell a far different story than the one the Warrens sold. First, no historical record links Bathsheba Sherman to Satanism or any form of witchcraft. The impaled baby story appears nowhere in documents. She was never charged, much less convicted. In reality, Bathsheba died of natural causes at the age of 73, far from the dramatic suicide of the legend. Even the Warrens' own case files show inconsistent accounts, sometimes calling her a residual haunting, other times a demonic infestation. Their narrative served a purpose. It fit their worldview. For the Warrens, every haunting was spiritual warfare, and Bathsheba, already shadowed by local rumor, was the perfect vessel for their story. When James Wan adapted their story in 2013, he amplified the horror to a global scale. The white-clad specter, the needle through the cheek, the Latin chants, all cinematic inventions for the screen. The real Perron family has since admitted, "We never saw a witch. We felt sadness, loss, like someone was still grieving." But grief doesn't sell tickets. Demons do. The industry knows that fear is a far more profitable product. So the Quiet Widow became a global icon of evil, not because she was wicked, but because the Warrens needed a villain, and Hollywood needed a franchise. A simple family tragedy was transformed into a multi-billion-dollar cinematic universe. This is the legacy of a haunted reputation and the cost of turning truth into terror for entertainment. For the Perrons, the haunting wasn't a battle of good versus evil. It was a decade of living with the unknown. Young April Perron claimed a spirit told her 7 dead soldiers are buried here. Just one of many stories the movies left out. In 1974, a seance led by the Warrens ended in chaos when Carolyn Perron reportedly became possessed and was thrown across the room. Terrified and angry at the trauma inflicted on his wife, Roger Perron ordered the Warrens to leave, never to return. They stayed until 1980, unable to afford to move, living alongside entities that grew more intense after the Warrens' visit. Later owners like Norma Sutcliffe suffered too, not from ghosts, but from thousands of trespassing fans inspired by the film. Today, the Conjuring House is a destination for paranormal tourism, sold for over $1.5 million in 2022. We must ask, what do we lose when we replace complex human history with simple demonic archetypes? Bathsheba Sherman was a real person, a wife, and a neighbor. Her name has been etched into history as a monster. The Perron family lived through something they couldn't explain, but the explanation they were given may have been the real nightmare. Hollywood's shadow is long and dark. It covers the truth with a layer of cinematic paint that's hard to peel away. The next time you hear a ghost story, look for the threads of truth that were pulled to weave the web of terror, because sometimes the most frightening thing isn't what's hiding in the dark, but what we choose to believe about it. The truth is out there, if you're willing to look past the shadows.
She's here.
Today, the Harrisville farmhouse is a pilgrimage site. Tourists press hands to its walls, hoping to feel the chill. Ghost hunters leave salt circles in the cellar. TikTokers reenact the needle scene for views, all in the name of a woman who never asked to be remembered this way. In 2026, the property remains privately owned, but its legacy is public. Researchers debate whether the hauntings stem from geological EMF fields, collective suggestion, or generational trauma embedded in the land. But few ask, what would Bathsheba think? She was a mother, a farmer, a woman who buried children in an age when half didn't survive infancy. She lived through hardship, died quietly, and was posthumously branded a monster, not for what she did, but for what people needed her to be. At the Conjuring Files, we reject that erasure. We honor history, not as horror, but as humanity. The real terror isn't Bathsheba's ghost. It's how easily we sacrifice truth on the altar of entertainment. So the next time you watch The Conjuring, remember, the witch wasn't real, but the woman was, and her story deserves more than a jump scare. She wasn't a witch, she was a widow. Hollywood needed a monster. History offered a mother. The real curse? Forgetting her name. Like if you believe some ghosts are just silenced women. Subscribe for more truths behind the terror. She with someone who knows. The scariest lies are the ones we call history. The truth is in the Conjuring Files.